All right. I'm here talking to Gray Hamilton. And so the thing I really wanted to ask you about, because I know nothing about it, is tennis. Um, so, well, I really, because I really liked what you were talking about in the conversation you had with Neil and all those other guys about
Yeah.
masculinity, and it was interesting because I just had never really thought about tennis too much as like far as what kind of a sport it is, but it is kind of really unique in that it's like so individual, like one-on-one competition. Um,
Yeah.
but then there is like that team aspect too, like if you're on a school team. And what it really kind of reminded me of was, so I've been, trying to do the old books thing and reading a little bit of these, like Arthurian legends, and kind
Yeah.
of like how, like they had like the jousting as the thing, it was like, because they were like, they had this kind of fellowship and brotherhood, but then they would compete with each other because everybody wants to know like who's best. And so it was like, wow, that's kind of an interesting dynamic that you see in tennis, which I guess maybe I don't know, I didn't really expect it there, um, but it was really interesting, and so kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, and I know especially because you kind of had spoken about how there's like maybe some guys that have a more natural talent, and then other guys need a little bit work a little bit more of the discipline angle, and kind of like how those overlap, and there's like a sweet spot there somewhere probably, but
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot about this stuff because I tend to filter a lot of the thinky talky things that can be, if there's any way to filter them um, through or help me understand them through my understanding of tennis. I tend to do that internally just because it's like the thing the skill, activity, however you want to describe it, in my life that I have the most mastery and knowledge of anything. And so I tend to be someone who I think that um, great mastery and knowledge and experience in any domain um, can help you understand sort of the heights of other domains if you're able to sort of think pretty subtly about whatever it is your domain may be. And so I think through the lens of tennis quite a bit, and I think about tennis and just like abstractly and philosophically quite a bit, and sport more generally, and um, especially as I've sort of listened to a lot of people in TLC talk about embodiment and Vervaeke and Rafe Kelly and people like that. I try to it helps me understand what they're talking about to think through that kind
yeah.
of thing. And that's why it came, talking with Neil and those guys, which is such a fun conversation. It naturally comes out when I think about leadership and teams and versus individuals and persons and all of that. I just view it through the lens of that experience because I've seen it so directly. And I think sports are a team, especially at the elite level. So like say, forget like, the bastardization of sports that is like elite youth sport culture in the US,
Yeah.
but like really like, because they fool parents into thinking that every kid belongs at this elite level of sport where you need to be, sacrificing tremendous amount of time and money and all of these things. But it's just that does a disservice to the, I would say, monastic quality of true elite sports teams. I was thinking about this last night of just that it's such a close comparison between like a monastic order of men who, in a sense, leave the world and agree to a certain way of life. Obviously, with the aim of a monastic order being, of course, oneness with God and in community with brothers, and but obviously at a lower order, like Pajot always uses that analogy of a sports team, but it really he uses it, I think, to talk about hierarchy, but it also is really comparable in the sense of you give up certain ways of living to the higher order sort of value of success, individually and as a team. And tennis is an interesting example, like you mentioned, because it's in some ways within the sport really unnatural to compete as a team the way we did in college, because in the pros it's always an individual sport. But I love college tennis precisely because it plays with that, the unity and the multiplicity kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, on our team, we had a bunch of guys that all wanted to be professional tennis players individually, but in order to improve the most you could possibly improve in college towards that goal, and also you needed to work together as a team in practice, but also in matches to win, recruit. If you win, you get better teammates. It makes a better team. It makes you better to practice better teammates. It's like this spiral upwards, right? If you're able to work together. But if you have too many of these characters who are, okay, I'm just here to get, a scholarship and free training for the pros, and it's all about me, they end up actually doing themselves a huge disservice because they prevent that spiral upwards from happening. The tide that raises all boats, and they, most of those kind of people have no idea that they actually limited their own ability to develop as a person, as a player, through that environment, because they didn't, sort of sacrifice maybe momentary desires for the, the greater good of the whole. So, I tend to think through this lens a lot, and it's, I find that there's lately, I've been wanting to. I talked to Karen Wong recently, not on any of this, but I've been wanting to talk to her again. Because I know she tends to think through the lens of her art with almost everything, and I, for a while, have been thinking about. So the greatest tennis player ever, maybe not by results. Technically, Novak Djokovic is probably the greatest ever by results, or accomplishments. But Roger Federer is the greatest tennis player ever in I think the proper way of understanding the term great or greatness, quality of greatness, because he is an artist. People nicknamed him like the maestro, because he looks like he's conducting a symphony out there, painting a Da Vinci. I mean, it's remarkable what he was doing at the height of his powers, at the height of his skill. And this quality of like effortless grace that came through with just absolute precision. It was just a wonder in like the highest pressure situations you could possibly imagine. It was just absolutely beautiful. And growing up watching him and then becoming a Christian and developing sort of the vocabulary I have through TLC and reading and everything, like I've tried to continue to develop my understanding of tennis through the lens of how it can be seen as art. And it's, increased my appreciation for the sport tremendously. So I wish I would have had that way of viewing it when I was in the trenches playing, but that's life. So,
So, I mean, it was interesting for me to think about, just because reflecting on like my own, I mean, I didn't play much sports really. I was homeschooled most of my life. So, and my dad was kind of a nerd, so I wasn't really into it. But I became a fan of most of the popular sports to a certain degree, and but most of what I had participated in was collaborative kind of teamwork. So like I do music and like construction and building things, and so those are very much like team. It's interesting because it's you're working together, not against like an opponent or whatever. But then, but that's, there's also like that kind of thing with like teams, with team sports like football or baseball or something. It's like everybody has to know their role. And if they try to like get out of line to be like taking all the attention, the team suffers. But I was thinking about it, and so I'll share it. So this is the book that I have been reading a couple times. So it's Parzival. This is like one of the older King Arthur. King Arthur's kind of like not even the main character really, but it's one of the like older ones. So it's kind of like more rough around the edges and not as like I think I said like I think there's less like church propaganda in it a little bit. So because like it's like what are the guys really like fighting for? They're fighting for women. And I was thinking like, okay, well that's probably like that, but I mean that's the proper place where you have to have that kind of like one-on-one competition because you're not going to share a girl, you and another guy.
Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to go, like
Yeah.
so so obviously like there are times when you need that but my thinking was like that mode has really crept into like a lot of areas of life, like because even like working for a company where we are a team and all this stuff, it's kind of like everybody's got to protect their own back, and um you have to be careful about like if I do something risky to help somebody out, like if I cover up if I cover for my coworker like who messes up or something like that, it could come back to bite me, like if my boss found out or something like that,
Sure.
like so people are very much just they're reluctant to kind of get out of that individualist kind of
Yeah.
competition. So 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 how do you think like maybe I don't know your experience being on the team and also because you've done the coaching and you received coaching, that's like a really good a good aspect of it because you have that kind of like that mentorship aspect.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Sorry. No, finish.
well, I mean the thing with that is it's kind of like baked into it. It's like, well, you do that when your fighting days are over. So you're kind of eliminated from the competition just through time. But
yeah, it's it's interesting because competition plays a really, I would say, absolutely crucial role in like developing the highest possible expression of skill, both sort of individually and for teams. And it's a, in my experience coaching, playing and coaching, but really coaching, you see it so much more clearly once as you say, your fighting days are over and your explicit goal is to use your limited influence. And it is so much more limited than you realize, before you become a coach. Use your limited influence to try to develop or create. Really, it's more like creating an environment in which that may afford the growth of like a team spirit that is aimed at, a unified team spirit that is aimed at like the highest possible success. Like for us, we wanted to win a national championship, right? Like that's our goal in college tennis is, and not everybody's goal is that, right? And that's the difficult thing as a coach is you have to understand what the proper goal should be. And then you have to be able to create an environment that affords the possibility of the team developing. And within that team, it has to be an environment that affords the possibility of individuals developing to the highest level of their skill, because that's really the only chance you have of winning a national championship in college tennis, because the competition is incredibly fierce. So competition is incredibly crucial, because you can fall into ditches on either side, which are, just like you mentioned, right? You can start to think of everything through the lens of competition individually. Like I need to win everything. And maybe it's you're not in a tennis environment, you're in an academic environment. Okay, I have to win that. Maybe that's not terrible, right? It's okay to sort of think maybe it helps you to succeed academically. But then with women, okay, I'm competing and I want to win. On my college team, we had a huge fracture in one of our teams because there was competition of that nature that went very, very, very downhill. And that has happened in a couple teams I've coached as well, right? And that comes directly from falling in that ditch that you just mentioned. However, on the other side, you have a ditch, which we have experienced not as much last year, but I would say 2 years ago, especially with our team at Baylor, which was, really last year. The guys liked each other so much, and the group of personalities was such that nobody really wanted to rock the boat. And so they would hold back sometimes in practice, competing against each other, because even the couple guys that were kind of okay rocking the boat, they knew that they were a minority and they were sort of afraid socially. They knew that we wanted them to compete hard and, like, honestly at each other's throats in practice, but they were scared of their teammates' inability to handle that and not take it off the court, right, and let it affect their relationship off the court. And so we had the team. It's funny, like, it's far rarer to run into this problem, but we ran into a problem of, like, begging the guys, like, you guys are all incredibly skilled, highly competitive individuals, but when it comes to practice with each other, it's like you're scared to, for the other guy to be mad at you. But then vice versa, it's like you guys are so sensitive that you can't handle, like, a high stress situation and being okay with your buddy 20 minutes later. Like, you can't take that off the court. And so it's like we had to develop. It's not that they lacked competitiveness, but they didn't know how to handle that situation. And so if you fall into either of those ditches, then competition is sort of like a barrier, in one sense. But if you are able to, as an individual, but then especially as a coach, you have a team full of individuals that are able to have competition in its proper place and use it as this, like, opponent processing of, like, myself. And, I had one guy on my college team who was my doubles partner, and we just had a great training relationship. Like, we could go at it, like, to the point of, like, whoever's losing on a given day is really mad. And as doubles partners, we had that same relationship with the second, the other best team on our team, where we would play each other and, like, it wouldn't nearly come to blows, but it would be intense. Which people don't view tennis that way, but, like, it can get quite intense because it's so personal. But I would say we had it in its proper place, such that maybe for 15 or 20 minutes after practice, you're like, I don't want to talk to that guy. Like, I'm just going to go to class, but then by 5 p.m. you see him for dinner and it's, like, totally fine.
Yeah.
And it made all of us so much better that we could, within the gladiator ring, go at each other and not let it spill over. But we could go at each other because we weren't terrified that it would spill over. You know what I mean? So if it's in its proper place, competition is absolutely crucial. But unfortunately, far too often you fall into the ditch of competition spilling over into the way you view every area of your life. And then much more rarely, but equally as sort of limiting, you are scared of competition affecting your ability and others' abilities to, like, be in relationship with one another. And so you just shy away from ever really laying it on the line and putting yourself out there, which is a skill. And so if you don't build that in practice, if you don't build that in a safe environment of being able to, like, really put yourself out there, you definitely can't do it in, like, a truly competitive match environment. And then in life, like, I've seen, then you're very timid in other life circumstances too, so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, so I know you read the little letter that I sent, and, like, so,
Yeah.
it's very different kind of environment, but some of what you're saying there definitely resonates, like, because it was I would say, I was working at a church where the musical aspect was pretty competitive, just in the fact of, like, if you, like, there wasn't a lot of room for people to kind of, like, come in and not be that great and, like, figure out their place. It's like you had to be good right away, or else you weren't going to get an opportunity.
Sure.
And so I kind of saw that, well, like, okay, well, yes, and that makes sense if the goal is purely just to have the music that's the best with the least amount of mistakes. But since it's a church and like part of the environment, like now it was good because we had some other there were some other opportunities besides like the Sunday mornings where there was like a school and they had chapel services, and there was like that was all kids, and so it's like it was okay for them to stink, so they had that opportunity. But like but maybe getting people up to the top level didn't always, it wasn't always the best, and in some other aspects as well, like balancing the thing of you want something to be like excellent versus creating that environment where it's safe to try and to fail.
Yep.
And so I think, and so I would say like, well, in the grand scheme of things, like in a church environment, I mean, there's a place for excellence, and but yeah, it is important maybe to have that shift focus onto like what is being produced in the person more so than the results that the person is producing. And that's kind of like having a more kingdom mindset about it. That it's not something that the world tends to promote. But I guess maybe that's just like the problem of having everything be so like results oriented and having the competition and the stakes so high. It just leaves a lot of people kind of like struggling on the side. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't really know where I was going with the question, but but more of an observation.
It's good. It's a really good observation. Because it's a really something I've thought about is like it's really unhealthy. I mean, it's particularly unhealthy if that dynamic exists in the church, which obviously it does, like you're saying with music. And I think it definitely, at least in the sort of evangelical environment that I've been around, it seems to exist with pastors as well, of like the sort of competitive ladder of like, maybe you have to start as a youth pastor, and even though you don't really want to be a youth pastor, but you won't get a chance to, all of that. You won't get a chance to preach until you've shown that you can do it here and there. And it's, it can sometimes seem like a bit of a popularity contest and all these things, and very much competition. That's really unhealthy. But I've wondered, like, to what degree it is, because it's really unhealthy in sports too. And that shouldn't be the way, like this results oriented or like strictly results oriented way of viewing things should not be the way that most human beings relate to like the physical activity and the physical like domain. But also, like, would we ever have gotten Roger Federer, or Lionel Messi or Michael Phelps, without that dynamic to some degree existing, of like the competitive drive and the status associated with results and things like that. And maybe like maybe the existence of those near perfections of the art is like a lesser good than that dynamic just not existing at all.
Yeah.
So like that's just the answer, but it's definitely a question, because I'm like, man, for me, like I'm a tennis player, but Michael Phelps is probably my favorite athlete of all time. And like what he was able to do in the Beijing Olympics in 2008 is like, it stands as one of the great feats in the history of humanity, I think. And it's really not talked about very much, but his book that he wrote shortly after Beijing, leading up to London, about his early life leading up to Beijing, his first few Olympics, and really a lot of his training, leading into the 8 golds he won in Beijing. It just like there is such a beauty in the discipline and like that he was born to swim. He was born to swim and to do it that well, or at least it would seem as such.
Mm.
So it's tricky, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wonder because like I'm just thinking about the effects of this because like so if I think about my own experience like playing guitar, so now like whatever I started when I was like 12 years old and that was 20 almost 30 years ago now at this point. So and like I didn't know anything. I didn't. It was like some of my friends were learning to play guitar, so I was like, okay, I'll do that too. And it kind of was a fun thing. But it's like now, if you go on like YouTube or Instagram, you see like a 5-year-old kid that's like greater than any guitar player that was alive when I was growing up, and then it's just like, and then it's like at that point, it's like, what's the point of me? What's the point of me picking this thing up? And so, I mean, and I'm sure. That's obviously that's the thing. It's like not everybody can be a professional athlete, but I think maybe it's good if we have some of that culture of like there's a sweet spot where it does inspire people to want to play because they enjoy it. So like do you think are most college tennis players like lovers of the game for the rest of their life, or do you think they're getting burnt out at some point, or
It's a real mixed bag. Like that is the thing. Like as you're talking, I'm thinking like we definitely shouldn't have nearly as many people trying to pursue the mastery to the degree that a Roger Federer achieved it, right? Because so many of them are not in a situation in which that is the proper thing to do. Like I was listening yesterday on my flight home last night to Jordan Hall's conversation with Gary Shang, that super long one he had a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, and he just talking about how even something that on the surface can look, or like in its most obvious form, look like a good thing. I think they were talking about evangelization, and I don't want to I'm not making a stance on that one way or the other, but something that can look really good on the surface might still actually not be what God would have had you do. Because there might have been a greater good that he had in mind for you to participate in. And you can sort of take that over to what we're talking about with sports or music or whatever domain it might be. It's like, should this many people be sacrificing the things that they sacrifice to pursue a kind of life that may, yes, genuinely give them the best possible chance to be like a professional tennis player or a touring musician or whatever it might be. But it still wasn't like, that wasn't what God would have called them to do. Like the sacrifices that they made, is that really what was best for them and for their family? Because in athletics, I can tell you that for thousands and thousands and thousands of families, including many who went on to play and go on to play Division I sports, even for a scholarship, it was emphatically not the right thing for them to do, because they get burned out. They go to a university they probably shouldn't have gone for because it was the team that gave them a chance, and they have a toxic relationship with teammates or coaches, and they prioritize their sport over their academic studies, like I did. I put tennis was my thing. I wanted to be a professional. I put my studies, I did well, but I did not prioritize them. And then I graduated and within a year had massive regret. Not because I was sad that it's weird. I was like, I'm so glad I did what I did with tennis because I achieved a greater level of mastery than I ever could have hoped. But I did that at the expense of like putting the proper, I sacrificed things that, looking back, if I were to make the decisions again, I would not sacrifice, so it's,
yeah. I mean, I think, there's like a kind of thing, well, there's like a law, I don't know, I guess, is it the law of diminishing returns or there's kind of a thing just when it comes to that level of mastery, where it's like, you invest a little bit, you're going to get, if you stink, you start off, you don't know anything. It doesn't take long to get twice as good as you were. And then you can, you get better. But then you get to a certain point where it's like, you have to put in incredible effort to get like 1% better.
Yeah.
and then you're probably reaching some other limit just with your natural abilities and stuff where you're never going to achieve certain things. So it's kind of like I think figuring out that sweet spot and identifying it, and then like that's probably a really good thing to encourage people to do. Because like with guitar playing, it's like I I know like there's like stuff that I'm like I'm never going to care enough to try to do, like, and there's just no reason to. But because I've like mastered a pretty good level of competency, I can really appreciate what like the virtuosos can do in a way that I couldn't when I was like just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a value in that, and then also I think like you were saying, when it switches to other domains, like so I can even think about it like with other instruments. It's like I've tried to mess around with like the piano a little bit, with the drums a little bit, just like at the beginning level, but then just realizing like, oh, okay, well, I know it would take so many hours for me just to get to like the competent point on those because I've already done it on guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can really also appreciate like those who have mastered those things in another way. So there's a good value in in figuring that out. So something like tennis too, especially for somebody who's more athletic, is probably it's a really good thing if you can get into it and then preserve your love of the game, learn to where you can really appreciate the beauty of the art when you see it performed masterfully. Yeah. So, but it just seems like, I don't know, I guess we just are always like, I can't think of many aspects, and it's hard even to say that this is like, I don't know. I think it's kind of wisdom or whatever, because it's like, but we are so focused on like always being like excellent and like the best that it's like there's no domain of life where you can say you should just get to the point where you can do it reasonably well and then like not worry about it.
Well, yeah, it's man, it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, part of the problem is that we've ascribed there's so much external reward of status and resources that, at least for sports, but also, I mean, also for music, even within the church, which is crazy. There is so much external reward that with the professionalization of sports and music, that becomes a temptation to be like a driver for your pursuit of mastery, such that you make certain sacrifices that maybe, like, almost certainly, if there was no thought of real significant financial status, etc., reward, you probably wouldn't trade whatever X thing for the time to put into achieving a certain, or the chance of achieving, because it's never guaranteed, like the chance of achieving a certain level of mastery. But at the same time, like, those rewards, they also have their proper place, like in a proper like fractal hierarchy, where maybe the issue is actually that we are, and I hate, you come back around and you're like, the issue is the machine, like, of course, but this one particular aspect, I think it's accurate to say, like, it is very inspiring for children around the world to be able to see Roger Federer play tennis on TV. But it also in a way robs the man who, like, okay, let's bring it back to your example of guitar. Maybe you achieve a level of mastery that is like, if you, relative to all guitar players ever, just pretty bare bones competency. But at the fractal level of your neighborhood or like your church, you are the best guitar player. And you are given a certain level or reasonable level of status, praise, whatever it may be. Maybe it's resources in the form of you're paid by the church to play guitar because you are the best guitar player. that feels right.
Yeah.
But in a world where you are not actually like here in 2025 in the internet, in the digital, you are not compared to Michael is not compared to the other guitar players in the pews at the church. Michael is compared to all the guitar players that the people who are hiring a guitarist have heard on YouTube and seen on TV. And it's the same for sports, right? It's like parents are like, oh, my kid's good, but he's not like Ronaldo was when he was, 9. So we need to, but it's possible that he could be because we've seen that Ronaldo was that good. And so, there's, you're always compared to the best version because we're all connected to all of the people who do any given activity around the world at any given time. But all you see is a highlight video. You don't see the circumstances, right? So you don't hear the detail, or maybe for some people who a documentary is made about, but in vast majority of people, you don't hear like, oh, well, that guy who has such amazing mastery of, like I saw a video of this guy is 23 years old, who's like one of the most renowned brick masons or whatever in Europe. And he restores, he has earned the right to restore parts of cathedrals all over Europe, right? And he's 23 and you're like, I mean, that's absolutely incredible. But you dig into it a little bit, like, oh, his dad was a renowned brick mason and he's been sort of apprenticed as a brick mason since he was 5. He's laying brick at the age of 5.
I saw a clip of that guy. I didn't know any of the backstory, but I did see.
Yeah. So that's the clip I saw. And I don't know. I looked him up or whatever it was. And I saw, oh, okay. So his dad was a brick mason. It makes sense. And it seems like he was probably almost certainly called by God to be that good a brick mason at 23 by nature of his father and his circumstances. But for the most part, unless you do the digging, like you just saw the clip, you didn't do the digging. And it's like, oh, well, who am I? What if I'm a 30-year-old brick mason who's, not nearly half that? I'm like, well, geez, I'm nothing compared to that guy. But maybe I never knew a brick mason growing up, and it took quite a lot of effort and sacrifice for me to even find any kind of training or anything, And so you extrapolate that to everything. It's like you see a great tennis player. Well, most of the here's a clue. Most of the best tennis players in the world, their parents were really, really good tennis players. Like, not I wouldn't say the majority of the top 100 right now, but a very significant portion of the top 100 men and women in the world, if you look at their parents, they were really, really good tennis players. I can say for sure because I know almost all of the top American guys, most of them had a mom, dad, or both, stepdad, older brother, who was a phenomenal player, right? And that I cannot emphasize enough. Coming from a family who nobody played tennis in my family except for my mom very casually before I learned how to play, the advantages, the pitfalls that you avoid, the correct strategies and the coach, all the advantages you have of having a really high level player in your family cannot possibly be overstated how much that helps you. But you don't know that, you don't know any of that, and so you're compared to those people without knowing the circumstances that, I would say God ordained circumstances that led them to have the capacity to grow in that mastery without making probably the same level of sacrifice that you would have to make to achieve that mastery, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think maybe that's part of the problem. So I think, there's like a double problem kind of going on. Cause I think too about like, just like, the problems of young people with like dating and getting married and stuff like that. And it's like the beauty standards and stuff of like, for like the expectations of for guys of like, you've seen like the most beautiful women in the world, mostly naked, since you're like a teenager. Whereas, the prettiest girl in your hometown is not going to like compare the same way or whatever. And then girls have the same thing. And, they're like, well, I could just go to New York City and meet some rich guy. And
of course,
and so it's funny because it's like this tiny little one, a percent of the top percent, like living out this crazy thing. And then everybody else is like thinking that's the way and then just unhappy at home because of it. but then also there is that whole component of we don't know all what goes into making somebody be that top of the
Exactly.
1%. So, which, yeah,
And you
it's
don't,
like,
yeah, you don't know what they had to sacrifice. I think is like the
yeah,
best way to look at it. It's like
yeah,
when I stopped playing professional tennis, I had just become a believer, and I was just like my whole entire, all of the foundations, my axioms had just gotten like buckled at the knees. Every axiom. Like I didn't know any. I'm like, I know Christ loves me and died for me, and that is my string. That's all I have. Like the rest, I don't know what's true, what's not. I think I've been doing everything wrong my entire life. I thought I knew things, I knew nothing, which is a good place to be, but it's also like a incredibly destabilizing and difficult place to be. And I stopped playing tennis because I was, I had a shoulder. There were practical reasons, but they were all overcomable. Like I really thought practically I genuinely believe I could have been top 200 in the world and made a living at tennis, and over the long term. But I stopped largely because the sacrifice that I started to be able to perceive what I had sacrificed to become the level I had achieved, and the deficits that I saw now in myself with like the vision that Christ had given me of my life and my family and all these things. And I'm like, what I would have to sacrifice to get to that level of mastery, which I've always said was my goal, and I see as being attainable. But now that I actually think I have the spiritual vision to really count the cost, I can't do it. I can't do it. It was not worth it. And I remember talking to a friend of my brother's in Mexico City like a year later, and I've been thinking about this. And when I had quit playing, I could not have formulated it that way. But a year later, I was able to sort of formulate it in that way of like, I think I could have been one of the best in the world, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice the things that I now saw to have, family and the possibility of getting married and having kids, before the age of 30, and all these things that I saw to be incredibly valuable now that I hadn't before. And my brother's friend was the first person who I talked to that was like, oh, that's exactly why. He was in venture capital in San Francisco, and investment banking in San Francisco. And he got far enough into that life, into mastering that life, that he took a look at the people who are above him with a greater level of mastery. And did I lose you? Oh, you're there. And he took a look at those people and said, yep, I'm not willing to give up what they were willing to give up to get to that level of mastery, despite the fact that I actually love what I do. I can't give all those things up. Which is just such and it's like sort of I don't know what color pill. It's a bit of a black pill, but maybe you could say it's a white pill, to realize some people will not have to give up as much to get to a higher level of mastery. And that's just how the world works. And that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, that's, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's interesting how much that kind of like mastery viewpoint has like affected almost every domain of life. Like, because it's just, I mean, and part of it's just like the results driven thing. Cause it's like people, if it doesn't come easy, like what's the point? Like, what's the point of putting in the effort? Or why would you put the effort in if you know you're not going to be able to make it to like the top or whatever? I mean, which I don't think that's true. Like, sometimes like there's something, well, okay, let's see. What's the hardest thing? Marriage, parenting. Those are like the hardest things, but, and it's interesting. It's interesting. Cause like, okay. So when my wife and I got married, we got married at the same like summer as a bunch of other couples in our church. Like there was one, and we did like premarital counseling, and they had you take these like personality tests to kind of like see like where are you compatible in these different ways and stuff.
Oh, I think we took one of those too.
Yeah. And like, so, and there was one couple that were like, they were like the same, like they had like the same thing. And like, and my wife are like opposites, like opposites and stuff. but it's like, I know very much this is the woman that God has led me to marry. Like I asked for signs, I asked for evidence and all these things. And here 11 years later, I'm more sure of that than ever, but it wasn't, but like they got to have like a marriage that was much less strife, but
Sure.
so there, as a team on some other thing. But for me and my wife, it's like, okay, well, some of that friction. Oh, so they can, they can work together on their goals.
Sorry, hold on. Yeah, I lost you for probably 10 seconds.
Okay. So yeah, the couple that they're all on the same page. It's like they can just get going, work together on the goals, doing their thing. My wife and I have to like figure out how to deal with each other, but that friction is like helping both of us to grow and change in like a really good way, and be like, okay, well, this is part of the plan. And at the end of the day, I think it makes it more, I don't know, I would say it's more valuable. I'm sure everybody's in a good marriage, your marriage is valuable and they're all unique. But for me, I guess it was good. It was good to, and some of that, maybe even I could say it was the competition, because like very much like being married to a woman that doesn't like worship the ground I walk on has helped me to become a much better person. And that was definitely the fantasy that I had in my mind when I was like 22, that so this stuff works out. But but I don't know, I guess maybe that's just the thing, is seeing like the value in the effort itself rather than just the results.
Yeah, well, it's like not exactly what you just said. Like it may paradoxically be a better thing that to be pursuing something that is harder for you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like push too far on that in marriage, because like you don't want to say, although it is perfectly possible and almost certainly true that some marriages are more sanctifying for those who are part of them than others. Sorry,
you're frozen now.
Oh,
sorry, you froze for a minute. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I don't think that that's controversial to say that some marriages would be more sanctifying for those two than others. And I think again, we've been using this lens, so I'll just keep using like the lens of in my, for tennis, for me, like I sort of rode this ladder of like, at first when I was a young kid, I cared about being the best in my town, and then I was the best in my town, and then I started playing kids around the state and realized I wanted to be the best of those kids, and sort of climbed that hierarchy, and then you played around the region and then around the country, and you sort of climb these sort of like ladders and expand your view of sort of competition and who you're measuring yourself against. And I will say the cool thing about tennis and the opportunities that my mom and dad, but especially my mom, the sacrifices they made to allow me to continue to like find my limits there, was like, for me, tennis was this thing where I was not the best in the United States. I was one of the best. But the thing about tennis is that it's international. And so at each level, I thought I was really good. And then you realize you're good, but you're not that good, and there's more. And so I was always at this, I think it's hard because looking back, I didn't view it this way. And I can only say this in retrospect. During it, I always felt like, man, I'm 6 months or a year behind these other kids or these other guys. Like, I should be further along. But looking back, it's like I was always at this edge of development that I always knew I was good enough to really compete with the best, but I was not quite there. And so I had to just absolutely work. I mean, my work ethic was something that I was praised for pretty consistently throughout my entire career because I never felt like I was at the top, but I always knew I was close enough that I had the capacity if I sacrificed enough and if I worked hard enough and focused enough that I could get there. And so for me, I think tennis was exactly where I needed to be, given the opportunities I was given to continue to ascend the different levels, such that I had to submit myself to the virtue of hard work and learning how to prioritize things and learning how to discipline myself in innumerable ways. And even like at my academy, learning how to lead younger kids in such a way that for me, like for me to be able to improve as much as I possibly could, I had to lead those younger kids to improve as much as they possibly could, and how that developed leadership skills in me and the ability to speak, in front of people and lead others. And then going into my college team, the same. Like that was it. It became a sort of like, I don't want to say like ladder of divine ascent for me. Like it became a ladder of virtue for me precisely because it was always really hard to get to where I wanted to go. Like I never for one single second felt like my journey in tennis was easy. Despite the fact that people in my hometown viewed me as like the prodigy. I was, there's a friend of mine who I grew up with, Tommy Paul, is currently number 9 in the world. And we played each other from the age of 7 all the way up through the juniors. And I always knew he was one of the best in the country, but if you could go back and tell my 10-year-old self that he would be number 9 in the world, I would have felt so much better about myself for losing to him all the time, but he was just the North Carolina kid that I played, at the time. And it just helped me so much to always have like something to strive for, but also knowing that the virtues were developed by the fact that it was not too far out of reach. So it was that proper level of difficulty,
What's really interesting of that is like, I feel like, I've definitely heard like lots of stories of people where you have a local rival or something, and because of the strength of that rivalry, it ends up propelling like both people to the top of their field. Like there's stories about that in like music and the arts and all sorts of other things as well. I mean, it's kind of like it's like brothers or whatever, it's like Jacob and Esau or something, they go their own weird paths, but they eventually come back, and they're both like, when they make peace, they're both like really established, and they've kind of figured things out, and they can relate to each other again. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah, and it's like Joseph, would Joseph have become who Joseph became if he had not been treated the way he was by his brothers?
Yeah,
like that's an interesting question.
Probably, yeah. I mean, probably not. Yeah, I mean, if they hadn't been jealous of like the treatment that he got, he may have just, he wouldn't have had the
easy life. Yeah, he may have had the easy life and just been like the preferred son. Instead he was put through what he was put through, and went through the fire and was forged into something special. So there is something, even to go back to like marriage. Obviously there's the pitfalls of like being so different that there's constantly friction. Like if you are not crystal clear on the orientation of your marriage towards Christ, then I mean my parents were divorced precisely because they were unable to submit themselves to the greater good of the marriage, because they didn't have like an eternal, like they were not believers, and so they didn't have an orientation towards Christ. And so when they were very, very different from each other, it just resulted in friction that compounded until things fell apart. But if you have that orientation and you are willing to submit yourself, then there is a sanctification that, in my wife and I's experience, that we started out, we're only 3 years in, but until we had our baby, we were like the couple you described. Things were just cake. And we were always like, man, I feel bad for people who have a hard time, because we're having a great time. This is great. And then we have a baby, and it's like, man, this is way harder. And now we're having to figure out how to relate to each other in a completely different environment. But like, I've tried to remind my wife, and is like, that's good. Like, this is good that we're going through this. It's not easy, but we will both be sanctified all the more by this friction that's happening right now, than we would have from our first 2 years where we, really argued no more than a handful of times.
Yeah. Well, this is a good reminder for me because my wife and I, she just last Sunday was our last Sunday officially in our official capacity at our church.
Mm.
And so she's stepping down she was the one working there most of the time. And she's stepping down because we're having another baby in November. And
Congrats.
thank you. And so 4 babies is too much for working that much. And kind of some of her thought was that she wants to be able to support me in some of my ideas and projects and stuff like that. But it's scary because we're going from 2 incomes to 1, and three children to 4, so it's gonna be a lot of stuff. But I guess I haven't been pushed maybe enough in a while, so I need some of that good friction to propel things forward. That's what's that the zone of proximal development. I think that's what
Exactly.
Reiki says. So so that's
Exactly.
where you were at with your tennis progression, always on the edge of like never being able to feel like you figured it out. And I
Yep.
think, I think that it's maybe just to think like the fact that we have like a purpose that's eternal means in some ways we don't ever get to retire or whatever, or maybe you do, maybe hopefully if you do things right you do get to, and you can just and you can enjoy the period where you're the one dispersing wisdom and encouragement instead of always having to like strive for it. But like, yeah, it's not the vision that so many people have of just like accumulating enough stuff so they can do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
That's actually a really good way of thinking about it. I even through like the lens of my tennis playing versus coaching, like I'm in sort of that. It's funny because as athletes, like as tennis players, we use the term retirement, because it's like funny. Like I retired from playing tennis at the age of 23, which is, it's just funny to say, like, you're 23 retired, but it's like and adults, especially older people, would often like laugh when I said that. And it's like, I understand why it's funny to you, but also, and I'm not trying to say this in a haughty manner, but like I sacrificed more and committed more of my life to developing myself as a tennis player than like most 50-year-old men have ever done for almost anything. Like, and I really don't mean that like I gave up a lot. It was everything to me. And so it felt like a mini death and a retirement. But like the cool thing about getting into coaching, and I don't know, I'm deeply into a longer period of discernment about my future vocationally and what I feel called to, and what the Lord has for me with work and for my family and all of that. It's like really present right now. And I have no idea where that's going to lead, but it has been a huge blessing to be able to coach for the last 6 and 7 years and be in that period you just described of like dispense. It's a different skill. So it's not like I'm just sitting here pouring out like, oh, I know everything. It's so easy to pour it out into younger players, but like there is a lot, like there are so many mistakes that I can help them avoid and things I know that I can, help develop these younger guys. And that's been really, really cool to be able to pour out what I built up over a really long time. And yeah.
Have you ever looked into like athletes for action?
Yeah, Athletes in Action. So a mentor of mine here, who actually is my spiritual director as well, we just started doing spiritual direction, which is really cool. He worked for them for quite a long time in sport ministry.
Okay, yeah, one of the pastors at my church, he works for them down at UTSA with all the teams there and stuff. So I'm just like, that's it's a cool thing to bring
It
that
is.
in, you know. So
It is. Yeah, my mentor did a PhD here at Baylor that he finished last year in sport ministry after like a 35-year kind of career in the trenches of that. And yeah, he used a lot of James K. A. Smith's stuff about liturgy and stuff to understand sports and relating that to the spiritual life. It's his work's really cool. And we've talked a lot about, you know, helping athletes understand faith through the lens of their understanding of sport rather than just like something to be added on, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really valuable because that's part of what I talked about with Jordan the other day, you know, is that really like it's like anything that you can love and be passionate about, like that love and that passion, it comes from, or it should be properly rooted like in your love of God. Sometimes we tend to make idols out of these things, but if you get it in the proper order, you know, it's kind of an amazing thing. But we have more of the people that are experts on like churchy stuff talking about that than the people that are experts on things like tennis and, you know, other creative and, you know, whatever, any aspect of life really. So, but
Yeah. And it's important. I mean, it's like, it's incredibly important for people who, I saw a tweet, I think it was yesterday or the day before, somebody saying, you know, we need more, maybe it was podcasters, we need more people at the top of their field recording conversations of just them talking shop. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Like, I agree with that. I think anybody who is pursuing anything to try to achieve mastery really appreciates hearing anybody else at the top of their field talk about it with someone, you know, two people with mastery. But like you just saying that, I'm like, my caveat would be we need more people at the top of their fields who are committed Christians using that language, you know, and being able to connect those dots because yeah, again, people who are officially affiliated with the church use church language, and it's not helpful for a lot of people.
yeah,
You know?
well, yeah. And, you know, the thing of it becoming like you know, a business or whatever. I mean, there's a good, you know, there's some good elements to like the professionalism that can come through that. Like, I know you were kind of like on the fence with the whole like mega church situation you guys are kind of going through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel you, you know, because I like so yes, like I said, we just basically finish up with our church or whatever. Small, and we're still, you know, we'll probably still go there fairly regularly, but we're kind of looking for maybe if there's other places where I could have more of an opportunity to get involved with something, or if, you know, if it's a job thing, you know, then, well, yeah, that would dictate where we go. But you know, like, so we went to one of the big mega churches out here on Saturday night. Like, they have a Saturday night service, and it was really good and stuff. And like, they're doing a lot of, like, they are big because they're doing a lot of things right. But I kind of feel like there's maybe we're reaching like the maximum capacity of like how much good to have everybody in that place, because it's like there's only 5 people that can play music, but you might have 100 people or 1,000 people that would like to learn, you know, and so it's like spread them out. My kind of idea has been like what if we could just, I mean, I feel like this would be hard to do, but if you could, it would be good just to convince like these mega churches, like just find the little churches in your city that are struggling and just send some of your families there, and not like try to make it a satellite church or anything, just you guys, we have enough people here, you go serve somewhere else where you're going to be more useful and you'll be in more contact with you know, the real work that's going on, and and more opportunities for people to screw up, which is really an important part of how people learn and grow.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been saying lately, like the I wish they would take the money they're raising at my church to either support churches that have older, like there's a ton of small churches here in Waco that are like certainly, in, where they've just got a lot of older folks, and in the next 10, sometime in the next 10, 15 years will likely not be financially feasible. Right. And so, take that money and not prop up those churches, but like, yeah, take the money, send families, maybe even send some young people on your staff who are like ready to take on more responsibility and help augment these bodies. Again, not as official satellites, but like there should be gotten when I've pushed back against this sort of move of just like the mega conference center church is, okay, well, there's a ton of fruitfulness. It's not just multiplication. There's a lot of fruitfulness that has come from the amount of resources that are put into a church of this size, like these, weekday ministries that we have. Like, we have a 12-step program called Regeneration, Regen for short, that is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful Christian 12-step program for any kind of spiritual bondage, sin, but also for addiction. And there's a premarital one, and there's a re-engage, which is for marital couple, all these things, right? So those are on different, and they're like, well, we're only able to do these things because of the resources that we have. And I'm sitting here like, well, I agree with that, but the more I think about it, I'm like, why not still spread the resources out to these smaller churches? And it's okay. And I realize I'm probably describing something like a diocese in the Catholic Church or something, but like, it's okay if there is one bigger central location where there are more resources relatively that are able to do more, but it doesn't mean that it should just continue to grow and grow and grow. Spot. Right? Like, I'm not saying every church needs to be the exact same size, and anytime it grows over a certain size, you must split. But like, there is this level at which the resources are probably better stewarded in augmenting the smaller bodies within a geographical area.
Yeah. Well, and I know because when you were speaking with Karen too, and you were saying like you're looking for that more ecumenism, and I think that's important to me because honestly, I mean, the thing is like because I grew up in church my whole life, and I've been to many of them, and it's like to me, what happens on Sunday morning is the least important part. So it's like I'm like, everybody just go wherever you want on Sunday morning, but it's what are we doing during the rest of the week, and in all and mega churches are often the ones that are doing the most in terms of those programs, and that's really.
Totally.
Really good, but there are things that but some of that even could be spread around, because ideally there's a problem. It's the competition, I guess you could say, against, because churches view themselves too much in competition with one another.
Oh yeah.
And that was even like when I was growing up. So my dad was a pastor, he of a really small church, and because of that we didn't really have a lot of resources. And so at a certain point, like when my siblings and I were entering high school, we started going to like the youth group at the church down the street, which was bigger because they had one. And then it just kind of became the thing like, okay, well, yeah, we just send our teenagers there. We'll go, when we have them, and at various times they might have like 2 or 3 teenagers that were going to my parents' church on Sunday morning. And it was like, there was no competition because they weren't fighting over the same territory, I guess you could say.
Totally.
And like, just, I think, fostering that idea would be really good. Because even like now I think of, so our kids are young. There's probably like a lot of benefit if we're in a church that has more support for them while they're young. But when they get into being older and getting into being teenagers, like, I think maybe we would want to put them in a church where they're more like missional opportunities and more opportunities to get into the mix of things and see some of the nitty gritty, and not so like the nurturing and even like the entertainment or whatever, it's like, it's okay. There's a value to that when you're like, because parents, they're going crazy, like can't get a break. It's like
Yeah.
that is a much needed thing, but it may not necessarily be the best thing for their own children as they continue to grow. So like having different churches like working together and not fighting about it would be really great. And then too, even just like the thing of, so many people who kind of deconvert and then they find their way into a church with a different tradition. And it's like, well, what if you had been just more exposed to that when you were younger?
Why are you going?
I'm talking with somebody.
Hello.
He said hi. So, yeah, like so, having a little more exposure to some of those things and not being so worried about like, what if somebody goes to this other church and they like it more, and being like,
Yeah.
if that's where they're hearing from God, then it's better for because especially think like parents, most parents are happy in the long run if they're like, I'm glad my child that walked away is going to church, even if it's not my church. But it's like, if you could just get them there first, they don't have to do the whole detour through, all the
spooky places.
Yeah, the messy stuff. So
No, that's a good point. I can hear the push. I can hear the pushback of like, oh yeah, but rooted over time, and it's hard because I feel that tension. Like I agree with everything you're saying, and I also agree with like, yeah, optimally, I'm an idealist. Like I can't. I am an insufferable idealist. Like I want to have roots somewhere, and like I would love for my kids to be in a church. I mean, obviously, if we stay in the same location, you move it's different. But if we stay in the same location throughout my kids' childhood, I'd love for them to be in a church and have those relationships that grow from a young age all the way through, and maybe they have the same pastor the whole time and all those things. Because I'm an idealist, but I also happen to be somebody that feels like most Sundays I don't feel the presence of God at my church on a Sunday morning almost really ever. And I'm aware that like a lot of that is because of sinfulness and flaws on my own part. Like it's not, but I'm not blaming my church by any means, because there are many people who really do have that experience. And I want liturgy and like I want to take the Eucharist every Sunday. It matter to me. So I hear and feel both. Because I know, my cousin, I was talking to my cousin this weekend, and she's probably the only other serious believer in my extended family. And they're in a similar situation where they're currently at a smaller neighborhood church where they know everybody. Like if they don't come on a Sunday, they get texts from people like, hey, like not like accusatory, but like, hey, are you guys, what's up? Like, is anything going on? And which is so sweet. And their kids know older people, like all the parish things that I sort of long for and that people around here like to talk about. But she's like, man, we are like, there's a certain level of aliveness that is lacking. And like, they're thinking about, going once a month to the bigger church 20 minutes away that, I think John Tyson planted or something that's got more of the stuff, more of the, she would call it aliveness or whatever, but the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that the tension's real. I don't have a great answer for it,
Well, I mean, that's even just to think like just the more churches are even willing to think about like, well, what are we doing on Saturday nights or something? Then you might like, because the great thing for us was when my wife and I, she was involved in children's ministry at our church, so we could rarely sit together on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
But there's a mega church that has a Saturday night service, so that was like the nice thing about it, is that we could actually go there and sit together. So like, I mean, it's bringing that competition down a notch, I guess.
I agree.
And there's a lot of time in a week besides Sunday morning. So that's why I always just say, like, Sunday morning, let's put that
Totally.
aside.
Totally.
That's what everybody wants to argue about, what you do on Sunday morning. But, you know, what you're doing on the rest of the week is kind of, that's where a lot more of the need is.
Oh yeah, and that's honestly why, like, is literally the reason we're at our church, is because of their emphasis on, like, the life group model of, like, we have three other couples that we meet with weekly, and just we're very intimately, like, involved in each other's lives. That is, my wife and I have talked about, like, do we think that we could stay in the group if we leave the church? And that's sort of a conversation. I don't know. My hope would be yes, if we end up deciding to do that they would. But I understand there'd be some, that would be hard. But that is the main reason we're at the church, is because the emphasis on that model and everything that doesn't happen on Sunday, so.
Yeah. And it's weird. It's a weird thing for me too, because, like, I was the pastor's kid. Usually I only have a few of those in any given church, but, like, so it's funny because I say, like, what I really love about Paul Vanderklay is that, like, now I'm like, oh, this is what it was like for the people that went to my dad's church. Like, he was a pastor in a similar vein. So it's like actually getting to experience it where, like, he's the pastor and not my dad, which he was good. He was a good dad too. So it was really good. But, like, but, there's just, but I mean, even just, I think, like, having that, like, mixing, and I mean, this is one of the things that's really great about the TLC, is that people get to share their differences, and we can learn from each other, without competition, I guess, in that sense. So
Yeah, at its best, certainly without competition.
yeah.
At its best. Yeah, that is definitely the mutual exchange of, and honestly, like, there's sometimes that, like, good, I wouldn't say without the competition, because it's like, even sometimes at its best, when there is a little bit of, like, that competition I referred to in like, on my college team, the good competition in practice, training competition, like, there is very much a good opponent processing training competition that happens in TLC that is, like, not a greater synthesis, but, like, a greater understanding, or maybe even just a greater humility on the part of the persons involved. And, like, that's a win, even if it was a bit of, like, slightly could be contentious, and there's difference. I think that is one of the aspects of TLC, is that it's a great training ground. I have felt trained way to my training in tennis by participating and even just by consuming over the years TLC. So yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't know. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, or
Maybe not right now? I need to make some lunch. I'm starving. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. We should talk again soon, though. I would maybe like to sit on this a little bit, and then maybe we could talk again sometime soon. I think that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Michael. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for talking with me. Teaching me about tennis. I appreciate it. So.
Thanks for asking. I mean, yeah, as you can tell, I think about this stuff a lot, so I could probably go on for entirely too long about it. So I appreciate you.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Have a good day. See ya.